Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Meezan lecture series. We are starting slightly late because of some technical glitch which has now apparently been overcome. You would recall that in this Meezan lecture series we had begun to study the social Sharia as understood by Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi. This series, as you know, is basically a delineation and explanation of his understanding of Islam as he has laid out in his exposition Meezan, also known in English as Islam, a comprehensive introduction. We are studying various chapters, not exactly in the same order as they are found in the book, but ultimately they will be arranged in the same sequence. We have studied various topics which relate to the social Sharia. So if you see on your screens, the topics that we have covered so far include marriage or nikah, then we have relations prohibited for marriage, then bounds and conditions of marriage, rights and obligations of the spouses, polygamy, etiquette of sexual intimacy, ila, and zihar. So these are the 8 topics that we have covered, and from today we will start another topic, a rather unpleasant one, but nevertheless a very important topic, and that is the issue of divorce. So this is an issue which the Quran has dealt with in considerable detail. There is a whole surah which has been devoted to it. Almost, we can say it's the whole surah or more than half of it. It's called Surah Talaq. It's the 65th surah of the Quran, and it deals with major issues which relate to talaq. And other than that, some of the other issues which relate to what has been discussed in Surah Talaq are also found in certain verses of Surah Baqarah. We'll be discussing those as well. But just to start off, yes, marriage is something which is primarily a companionship. It's an understanding between the spouses, and as far as this understanding is concerned, if people adopt this attitude of adjustment, they adopt this attitude of accommodation, however much they might differ in their temperaments, however much they might differ in their outlook, in their views, in their own personalities, they can still very efficiently tag along, because marriage basically is a union in which the two people or the spouses, they come together to highlight one another's strengths, to cover one another's flaws, and at the same time realize that they are two different people having two different backgrounds, having entirely different habits, or even if they are similar, but they could be different in temperaments. So basically it's an adjustment that has to be made. Every spouse needs a private space and privacy that has to be granted, and that privacy is something, if it is respected, it guarantees the marriage boat to remain afloat even in rough seas. However, there are circumstances in which, in spite of all efforts, marriage is not able to tag along, the two people or the couple, the spouses, in spite of their efforts. And even today, as we know, couple counseling is something which is in vogue even before this issue of divorce rises in the lives of people, or raises its head, as I was about to say. There are therapy sessions which couples, they do conduct through medical specialists in this field. But then, of course, everything done, there are still chances, and there are still so many cases in which, in spite of the utmost efforts, marriage is not able to pull along. So in such circumstances, as is the case with other Sharias, the Almighty has given a very firm directive in this last Sharia, a very emphatic directive that if, in spite of all efforts, marriage cannot be pulled along, and there is to be a situation, a scenario in which the two must separate, then this must be done in a very formal way, in a very, very vigilant way, and also in a way that chances of remarriage are always there. And this is something which, out of experience, we all know that at times living separately induces people, makes them realize that the faults they had or they could have overcome. And it's like a period of soul searching, it's a period of reflection. So if permanent separation, which means that divorce has taken place, then even then The methodology of divorce which the Quran prescribes and subscribes is one in which, if it is adopted in the right way, remarriage between the same can take place if, as I said, after some time of reflection and of course deliberation on the fact that the faults and the shortcomings that could not have been overcome earlier on can now be somehow overcome. Then, as I said, this is a possible scenario. So now let us study the basic statutes of the divorce Sharia that has been mentioned in the Quran. I'm going to read out the translation of Surah Talaq verses. They are slightly longish because of the fact that the surah is a very comprehensive one. I'm going to leave out the Arabic text so that we can concentrate on the translation and also save time. So these are the first 14 verses of Surah Talaq. In fact, these are the first 7 verses, not 14, and the total number of verses is approximately 14 or 15, and these are more than half of what we will be studying in Surah Talaq. So it goes like this: Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. O Prophet, when you people divorce your wives, divorce them according to their waiting periods, and count accurately the waiting period. In technical parlance, this waiting period, as you know, is called iddat. So we have translated this word as waiting period. So, and count accurately this waiting period, and fear God your Lord. During this waiting period, do not turn them out of their houses, nor should they themselves leave, except in the case they are guilty of some open lewdness. So you see, the first and most important directive here that is given is that in this scenario in which divorce has taken place, the count of iddat, the waiting period, must be kept in a very diligent manner, in a very careful manner, because this waiting period is something which is going to decide ultimately whether situation has arisen, if the restitution of conjugal right, or ruju, which as we call it formally, is going to take place or not. And that period of iddat, which means that you would not divorce your wife immediately, but give that time, that probation time. So that has to be counted. So the first thing which is mentioned is that iddatihinna, talliquhunna liiddatihinna, that you must divorce your wives, keeping in view this iddat period, because this iddat period, this waiting period, is ultimately going to determine the time of which is the final time of separation. And during this time, there are certain stipulations that have to be kept in view. And the most important of that is that wives should remain in the house of their husbands, and they must not leave them unless, of course, as the Quran says, illa ya'tina bifahishatin mubayyana, which means that some adultery or something of the sort has taken place, which of course undoes the whole concept of marriage. Other than that, wives are advised to stay in the house of their husbands. Yes, they can separate, live in separate bedrooms, but as we shall see why the Quran says that this is a very recommended thing. So it says that do not turn them out. It's not just that they have to remain there. Even husbands, they must be in this situation. They have to understand that as far as the Quran is concerned, this is something which is very, very important. So it says, do not turn them out of their houses, nor should they themselves leave, except in case they are guilty of some open lewdness. These are the bounds set by Allah, and you should know that those who transgress the bounds of Allah, it is they who wrong their souls. You know not that God might thereafter create new circumstances. So this is the reason, which is basically a secondary reason. The primary reason is something that we are going to study just after this, that living together might induce them to once again come to terms. So when you're living together, in spite of the divorce sentence being pronounced, there are all the chances that if you're living in the same premises, living in the same house, even if in different bedrooms, then there still could be that opportunity available for them to talk out their differences and return to one another. Of course, that's another procedure which we will study. So it says that divorce your wives in this very manner, Thus, when they approach the end of their waiting period, either take them back on equitable terms or part with them on equitable terms. And whether you want to keep them or part with them, in both cases, call to witness two honest people from among you. So once this iddat period expires, which we know from Surah Baqarah, is in the case of normal circumstances is three periods of three menstrual cycles, as we know. And the Quran says that if you want to finally part with your wives, and after these three menstrual cycles, it is important that you make this decision. Either you keep your wife back, or ask her, request her that you would have taken back your decision, or you let her go away. But in both cases, what is important is that you must call in two witnesses who bear witness that yes, this is how divorce had taken place 3 menstrual cycles earlier, but now this person is taking back his wife and she's willing to go back at the same time. Or if this is not the case, then witnesses have to be called and they testify that, well, now he has reached a decision that even after these 3 menstrual cycles, he's still firm on his decision, and now it's a parting of ways. So in both cases, as the Quran says, you have to call in 2 honest witnesses among you. And O witnesses, establish this testimony for God. It is this thing to which those are exhorted who believe in God and in the last day. And if those who fear God encounter any difficulty, God will find a way out for them and provide for them from where they cannot even imagine. This is a very, very reassuring sentence or verse from the Quran. It says that يَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ, which means that the Almighty, in such situations, if there is some discrepancy, and if there is this discrepancy which is going to linger on, and the situation arises in which, the case or scenario leads to a permanent separation, then there could be these windfall gains which might befall the separated couple in a way that they would not even imagine that God is helping them. So, and those who put their trust in God, for them Allah is enough to help them. God is sure to bring about His designs. God has set a measure for all things, and those of your women who have ceased menstruating, and they also who have not menstruated, in spite of reaching its age, if you have any doubts about them, then their waiting period or their iddat is 3 months. So once again, it is said that women who should menstruate in a certain age, which of course is the age of puberty or adolescence, but they have not menstruated, if they get married, or women who have ceased to menstruate, but there is a doubt about them, the Quran says, then the waiting period is 3 menstrual cycles, which is 3 months actually. And then it is said, then the waiting period of pregnant women is until they deliver the child. So this makes it absolutely evident that as far as this waiting period is concerned, the primary reason for this waiting period is whether the wife is pregnant or not. And as soon as that pregnancy ends, the waiting period finishes. And conversely, if there is no such pregnancy and you're absolutely sure, then she does not even need to observe the iddat period. This is a very obvious corollary. So God will ease the hardship of those among you who fear Him. Such is the directive of God He has revealed to you. He who fears God, God shall brush away his sins and shall richly reward him. During this waiting period, lodge these women in your homes according to your means, and do not harass them to make life intolerable for them. And if they are pregnant, spend on them until they deliver the child. And if they suckle your child, give them their remuneration, and decide this matter according to the custom after mutual consultation. So once again, of course, you have to lodge these women in your own homes. You must not make them leave your place. And the Quran says, do not harass them and make life intolerable for them. And if they are pregnant, the Quran says that you spend on them generously according to your own means. And this is something which is absolutely befitting for husbands to do. And equally important is the fact that if you are going to suckle or request her to suckle the child and she agrees, then you must also give her this remuneration, because this is a service that she is giving. And if you find yourselves in difficulty, another woman can suckle the child, which is, of course, an option which is given. Let the man of means spend according to his means, and he whose resources are restricted spend according to what God has given him. God does not burden a person with more than he has given him. Rest assured, after some difficulty, God will soon grant relief. So this is how the Quran has explained the directive of divorce. I mean, it's in detail in Surah Talaq. The procedural aspect of divorce has been explained, on the other hand, in Surah Baqarah. This is more of a broad procedural layout which has been given in Surah Talaq that we have studied these verses. But now we will go into more details as far as the procedure of divorce is concerned. But before we even start that off, what is very important to note is that the Quran says that before you even initiate this procedure of divorce, you have to realize that at times people can reconcile. If they are not able to reconcile themselves, then a help might be instrumental in making them reconcile. So, of course, as I was talking earlier about therapy, a very similar procedure has been laid out by the Quran, and that is a therapy that it has suggested for out of its own accord. And according to that therapy or that suggestion, the Quran says that if the husband and wife are not able to solve their problems mutually and they get stuck and there is a deadlock, then before even thinking of divorce, they must involve the family. And the way that they can involve the family is that one arbitrator should be appointed from the husband's side and another arbitrator should be appointed from the wife's side. And then these two should sit together and see if they can resolve the differences. Because you see, what happens is that at times this deadlock in communication is something which makes the two, there is a wide gulf that is created as a result of this communication gap that has developed. And at times the choice of words is such that you are not able to put across your own viewpoint to your spouse, and you're not able to receive as well. So this deadlock or this lack of communication or this communication gap, which sometimes occurs because of this of certain I would say dispositions, the Quran has said that this can be overcome by appointing two arbitrators. So the procedure which has been suggested is in fact laid out by the Quran in Surah Nisa, and it says, and if you fear a breach between the two, appoint arbitrators, one from his family and the other from hers. If the husband and wife wish for peace, Allah will create harmony between them, for Allah has full knowledge and is acquainted with all things. So hakaman min ahlihi wa hakaman min ahliha, which means one arbitrator from the husband's side and one from the wife's side. So they should sit together. They should try to make the two come together, or at least make that communication happen, or convey the stance of one to the other in view of the fact and in hope of the fact that what they could not do themselves, these two arbitrators might be able to accomplish. And dear viewers, we have to be very, very attentive to this, because normally this is a procedure which is not even adopted. So people seldom think of divorce in a calm or calculated way, out of their own fury, out of their rashness and anger. Divorce is pronounced, and the very important objective or very important advice which the Quran has given is totally ignored. So you see, this is a step which the Quran wants every couple who intends this to go through this divorce to follow, that they must involve the family, because this is a way of calming down themselves. This is a way of the family coming into play, coming into action, coming into the whole scenario. And even if this is not achievable by their side, then of course the divorce procedure must be initiated. But again, that point of understanding and the point of caution is that hakama min ahlihi and hakama min ahliha, which the Quran says that these two arbitrators, they must be appointed. And these two arbitrators, of course, as we can clearly see, they have to be wise and honest and people who are able to grasp the crux of the matter and are able to help out the couple. So in a single sentence, I can say this is that therapy which the Quran has suggested in not so many words, that the two must involve the family, or if not the family, then at least representatives of those family, which can come together and make these and try to make things work. So, as far as the procedure of divorce is concerned, or you can say the grounds of divorce are concerned, the Quran has not spoken about it, but of course this is common sense that if the two are not able to solve matters, they are not able to pull along in the marriage bond, in spite of trying hard, then of course this procedure has been given. And there is one instance which has been cited by Ustaz Ghamidi in his book Meezan, which I'd like to cite before you, and I'm going to read it out. It's an incident which tells us that how important at times very small things become in this matter of divorce. So this is the narrative from Bukhari, Jami' Sahih of Imam Bukhari. I'm just going to read out. As you can see, it's being displayed on your screens. That Ibn Abbas narrates that the wife of Sabit ibn Qais once came to the Prophet and said, "O Messenger of God, I do not have any complaint." This is very important to note. "I do not have any complaint regarding his character and person. However, I fear that I will lose my faith." When the Prophet heard this complaint, he said, Would you return his orchard? She showed her consent. At this, the Prophet directed Thabit to accept the orchard and separate her by pronouncing one divorce sentence. And some other narratives, they tell us that this lady was a very, very pretty and beautiful woman, and Sabit ibn Qais was not that handsome, I would say, in a very conservative way, and she did not like his face actually, and she thought that she might lose her faith by living with such a person. So even such a small thing in which a person or a lady is uncomfortable with, the Prophet said, okay, yes, there is this procedure which is set later on in the Quran and earlier on in Surah Baqarah, which tells us that if the reason for divorce is such that the husband also wants to give divorce and the wife also wants to take divorce, but out of this fact that her husband might have given some very important asset to the wife, he is simply not divorcing her. Then on such occasions, the Quran has suggested to the wife that if she gives back any gift that her husband might have given her, then it is absolutely okay, because this had to be pointed out, because in normal circumstances, the Quran has said that whatever you have gifted your wife must never be taken back. But in certain scenarios, as was the case with Sabit ibn Qais, that if the divorce is not taking place, she wanted divorce and he wanted to give divorce, but it was only because he had gifted this orchard to her that he was reluctant. So the Prophet settled this matter and said, well, if you would like to return that orchard, and Sabit is going to then divorce you, and then of course this divorce did take place, which of course tells us that circumstances are so different in different scenarios. And yes, this could be something so challenging to one lady and not to another lady, and it could be a case-to-case phenomena. And in her case, it was like a question of losing her faith, living with a person whom she did not like. She didn't like his face, so that is something which prompted her to seek divorce, and the Prophet said yes. So the important thing here to understand is that as far as this procedure of divorce is concerned, it is the right to divorce is given to the husband. The right to divorce is given to the husband, which doesn't mean that the wife does not have this right. The only thing is that both have that equal right of divorce. The procedure is such that in the case of the husband giving the divorce, he will of course have the initiative and he can give the divorce. But if the wife would like to get separated, then she will ask for divorce. So both have an equal right to divorce, but in both cases, the initiation of divorce will be from the husband. So if he is the person who would like to divorce, then of course he just needs to communicate this to his wife. But if the wife would like divorce, then she would ask him to divorce her, so that the initiation of divorce takes place from the husband in both cases. And the Quran has actually pointed this out at another in another verse in Surah Baqarah, it says, بَيَدِهِ أُقْدَةُ النِّقَاهِ, which means that the marriage knot is in the hand of the husband. So whether it is the husband or whether it's the wife, in both cases it has to be the husband in which, or who's the person who's going to initiate divorce. So initiation of divorce is from the husband, but both have an equal right. So what is being implied here is that if the husband can pronounce the divorce sentence, this is not what the wife is allowed to do. She just cannot say, I divorce my husband. On the contrary, she will ask the husband to divorce her, and of course then this procedure would be initiated. Now, as I have already mentioned, that divorce has something which, I mean, this is a procedure that has to be followed. So if there is any deviation in this, then this deviation has to be tackled with. Now, the important thing is that divorce must be given in that period of purity in which a husband does not have any sexual intercourse with the wife. So there is no sexual exposure between the two. So the Quran has suggested this period of purity in which he doesn't have any sexual contact with the wife, he should initiate divorce in that period. And we have this clear violation of the Prophet's directive in his own times, and we know that Abdullah ibn Umar, he was guilty of this, and once he did divorce his wife and she was passing through a menstrual cycle. So it was essential that he should have given her the divorce in the period of purity, but on the contrary, he did not give this due consideration and divorced her in her period of menstruation. So we find this case being cited in books of history, in books of hadith, and as you can see, it is being displayed before you. So the Prophet, when he got to know this, that he had divorced his wife in the menstrual cycle, he was angry, and he said that he must take back this divorce and then redo it in the right way. So it says, ask him to take her back and keep her in wedlock until she is through with her menstrual cycle, and then once again passes through this cycle and then is through with it. After this, he can either detain her in wedlock or divorce her before having sexual intercourse with her, because it is the beginning of the iddat, keeping regard of which the Almighty has directed believers to divorce their wives. So because of the fact that the iddat period can be determined through the period of purity, because that is the time that can be absolutely determined. But of course, because the lady is passing through the period of purity, that the Quran says that period of purity in which the husband doesn't have this, or the Prophet has said, does not have any sexual contact or sexual intercourse with his wife, then he should initiate. And because this was a violation, as you can see, the Prophet said that murhu falyurajiha, ask him to return his wife and do it again. So this gives us an important insight, and that is that any violation of the divorce procedure, if it can be atoned for in a manner that it could be done again, then the procedure has to be adopted in a way that the previous procedure should be annulled and the right procedure should be adopted. Again, something which is very, very, very clear. So the important thing is that if the husband has taken back his, as we have clearly said, that the procedure of divorce is something that has been laid out in Surah Baqarah. As I said, Surah Talaq is more general in the overall approach. So as far as the period of procedure of divorce is concerned, the first thing which has to be settled is that the Almighty has directed Muslims to carefully keep count of the period of iddat. So this is the first thing which I've already pointed out. So I'm just reading parts of Ustaz Ghamidi's book so that we are able to once again keep our pace with what we have understood regarding these Quranic verses. So, of course, procedure for divorce is something that we have just begun, and the first thing is that we have to keep count of the iddat period, and then the second important point is that until the iddat period expires, the husband has the right to take back his wife. The Quranic words are, thus when they approach their term appointed, either take them back on equitable terms or part with them on equitable terms. They refer to this fact. So the third important thing is that if the husband does not take back his wife within the iddat period, then once this period expires, the relationship of wedlock will cease to exist. Consequently, the husband is directed to make up his mind once this period is approaching its end. So the important thing here is that once this divorce is pronounced in a calculated way, in a way that now both think that this is the only way out, not in anger, not in frenzy, not in on the spot impulsive decision, but as a very calculated decision. So once this is announced and once the period of it finishes, now the husband has to decide whether he's going to permanently get separated or he's going to keep the wife with her. So if the husband, it's pointed out in Surah Baqarah that if the husband decides to revoke his decision and take back his wife, then this should not be with the intention of hurting or harassing her. It should not be in a way that you would like to harass her. This is something the Quran has said, and the Quran in Surah Baqarah has been now cited by Ustaz. He says that, and when you have divorced your wives and they have reached the end of their waiting period, either retain them with kindness or let them go with kindness. But do not retain them with the intention of harm, so that you commit excesses against them. And you should know that whoever does this wrongs his own soul, and do not make a mockery of Allah's commandments. Remember the favors He has bestowed upon you, and the law and the wisdom which He has revealed, of which He instructs you. And keep fearing Allah, and know that He has knowledge of all things. So, if a husband decides to part ways with his wife, he is directed to do so in a befitting manner. The words used in Surah Baqarah, which is verse 220, is tasrihum bi ihsan, which means that you befittingly part ways with her. And the implication of tasrihum bi ihsan, which means that you separate your wife in a very befitting manner, in a very kindly manner. The implications have been outlined by Ustaz in a couple of suggestions. He says that firstly, these are in fact not suggestions, these are in fact important instructions which are given by the Quran. Firstly, whatever amount of wealth, property, clothes, jewelry, and other items that have been gifted to the wife by the husband, they should not be confiscated by him in any circumstances. I mean, yes, of course, there are exceptions which are coming up, but normally when this divorce is going to take place, nothing should be taken back. So this includes, as I said, just cited, wealth, property, clothes, jewelry, anything that you have gifted your wife. And it should remain clear that nafaqah and meher, which are the absolute rights of a wife, and confiscating them is unthinkable. I mean, what he's saying is that these are not even mentioned here. So you are mentioning gifts. So what, let alone these things which are her own rights. So you see, a husband is liable for the nafaqah of his wife, which means maintenance, and her meher. So as far as her dower is concerned, he has to give that dower in all circumstances. The nafaqah, which means maintenance, of course, maintenance means the fact that she has to maintain herself, live as his wife, her pocket money. All these things, they are taken for granted. And whatever over and above he has gifted her in the form of jewelry or assets or wealth or property, that too must not be taken back. So important is this directive. Now, there are two exceptions to this. So in normal circumstances, this must not take place in any case that you are returning those gifts or you are trying to acquire those gifts back. But in two circumstances, a husband can take these back. And what are these circumstances? Let us study them. The first is, if it is no longer possible to keep a marriage intact according to the limits set by Allah, and the family elders in the society also support the annulment, but a husband is unwilling to divorce his wife. This is the same instance that we have just studied in the case of Sabit ibn Qais, that he wanted a divorce and she also wanted divorce, but he had gifted that orchard and he was not willing to divorce her because he would lose that orchard. So here it is mentioned in clear words in the Quran that if the husband is willing to divorce his wife simply because he's concerned about losing wealth, property, or other gifts he has given his wife, then the issue can be resolved in the following manner. The wife can give back part or all of the wealth gifted to her to relieve herself and her marital contract. In such cases, it would be lawful for the husband to accept these returned gifts. This is the first exception, that if in the case that this return of gifts can be accepted by the husband, if the wife would like to relieve herself simply because of the fact that the two are now in this situation that they are merely living with together because of some property or some wealth which has been gifted or given in the or inscribed in the name of the wife. So if she just returns those things which a husband, because of which the husband is reluctant in divorcing, then that would be fine. And the second is that the wife is guilty of sexual misconduct, open sexual misconduct, of course, referring to adultery. And this is mentioned in the Quran. So I'm just going to read out the Quranic verses which actually mentions these two sets of verses mention these two exceptions. So first exception is the one in which a husband is not willing to divorce simply because he has gifted something to his wife, and he just thinks that if he divorces his wife, then he will lose that asset. And the second is if the wife is guilty of adultery. So this is here that the Quran mentions both of them separately. So the first one is mentioned in Surah Baqarah in verse 229. It says, "And it is unlawful for you on this occasion to take back from them anything you have given them, unless both husband and wife fear that they may not be able to keep within the bounds set by God. Then if you also feel that they will not be able to remain within the bounds set by Allah, there shall be no offense for either of them regarding the gifts given by the husband if the wife seeks divorce by returning them to him in ransom. These are the bounds set by Allah, and do not transgress them. And you should know that those who transgress the bounds of Allah are wrongdoers." So this is the first exception. Just I explain what I just explained. So these are the Quranic words which mention this exception. And the second one is mentioned here in Surah Nisa, verses 19 and 21. "And do not treat them with harshness, that you may take away what you have given them, except where they have been guilty of open lewdness," of course referring to adultery. "And if you decide to take one wife in place of another, even if you had given the latter a whole treasure of wealth, take not the least bit of it back. Would you take it back by slander and usurping her rights? And how can you take it when you have lain with one another, and at the time of marriage they have taken from you a solemn covenant?" So this is the second exception that has been mentioned by the Quran. So we are discussing, remember, tasrihum bil ihsan, which means parting of ways in a befitting way. So the second point which Ustaz Ghamidi has pointed out is that the husband shall not be responsible to give the dower if the wife is divorced, such that the husband has not touched her, or her dower had not been fixed. However, if the dower had been fixed, but a lady was divorced before having sexual relations with the husband, then the husband is liable to pay half the amount of the dower fixed, except if the wife willingly forgoes the total amount or the husband pays the full amount. So this is very understandable that a husband shall not be responsible to give the dower if the wife is divorced, such that the husband has not touched her. And this is something which is mentioned clearly in the Quran also. So let me also read out those relevant verses before you. They say, "There is no blame on you in the matter of dower if you divorce women before touching them or before fixing their dower. And if you divorce them before touching them, but after fixing of a dower for them, then the half of the fixed dower should be given to them, unless they forego it or he forgoes it in whose hands is the marriage knot. And if you men forego your right, it is nearest to piety." So men have been exhorted that even in such cases, although they have a right to take back the dower, but they should not do so. It's like it's like an appeal that has been made to them. It is nearer to piety. "And do not forget your superiority among yourselves." So La tansavul fazla bainakum, a very important advice from the Quran, that this is your status over your wives. You have this degree of 1 degree in which you are the head of the family. So if you're able to, in these circumstances, to even forgo and let her keep the dower, then that is even better. For Allah sees well all that you do. Thirdly, a wife at the time of parting should be given some resources of life. The Quran says that this is an obligation of those who fear God and those who are the righteous. If a lady is divorced, even without going near her, a husband is exhorted to fulfill this obligation. So, I mean, it's not just the fact that you are talking about dower, but over and above that, while you are parting from the wife, or you're sending her away, even then the Quran says, وَلِلْمُطَلَّقَاتِ مَتَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ, and divorced women should also be given some resources according to the norms of the society when they are sent off. This is an obligation on those who are fearful of God. So, if a woman is divorced in a way that time of parting, the Almighty has actually urged the husband that he should give some parting resources to the wife as much as possible, and on the basis of this verse, even a law can be legislated in a country in which some sort of periodic support can be elicited from the husband, of course, unless the wife remarries maybe, or if she's in a vulnerable position. So as long as she remains in that vulnerable position, Mata'am bil Ma'ruf Haqqan al Muttaqeen tells us that it is the obligation of the husband that could be implemented in the form of a law, that until a certain period of time that she's able to make her two ends meet and stand up on her own feet, or if she plans to marry again, whatever the circumstances, the husband should support her until that time arrives. So according to the Quran, the amount of these resources should be ascertained keeping in view the norms of the society and financial status of the husband. So وَمَتِّعُوهُنَّ عَلَى الْمُسِيءِ قَدَرُهُ وَعَلَى الْمُقْتَرِ قَدَرُهُ مَتَاعًا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُحْسِنِينَ, and bestow on them resources of life while parting from them, the wealthy according to his means and the poor according to his means. This is an obligation on those who are righteous. Again, I mean, this is something which is very logical, that at the time of parting, the Quran has urged believers to give according to their status. So if a person is well off, he should give according to his own status, and if a person is not well off, he is poor, then according to his status, of course. But this should not be the case that he is the well off person and at the time of that parting he becomes stingy. So this is something which has been prescribed by the Quran. Now, since we are studying the procedure of divorce, the fourth important point here is that if a husband revokes his decision within the iddat, the lady will continue to remain his wife, but this doesn't mean that a husband can divorce his wife repeatedly in this fashion whenever he wants and then revoke the decision within the iddat. The Quran has answered this question by saying that a person can only twice exercise his right of divorcing his wife in the iddat and then revoking the decision in this manner with the lady. So the Quranic words are at-talaqu barratan fa imsakum bi ma'ruf aw tasrihum bi ihsan. This divorce may be pronounced twice, and then a woman must be retained with kindness or allowed to go with kindness. So in other words, what the Quran is telling us is that pronouncing, or this right to divorce in which you are able to take back your wife within the iddat period, this opportunity can only be given to a husband twice. So he can do this, he can exercise this right once, he can take back his wife. Now he's exhausted one chance. And then later on, if this time arrives once again that unfortunately there's no other way out, and the husband thinks that now circumstances are such that he should still continue with his divorce as he had done so previously on another occasion. So if another occasion has now arisen, he now has a second opportunity and option as well, that he can pronounce that divorce sentence, and within that iddat period, within that waiting period, he can still take back his wife. So these are the two opportunities given, and people erroneously think that, well, these are opportunities that have to be exercised at the same time, and they actually use or misunderstand this verse to think that three divorce sentences have to be implemented at the same time, because as we will see in the next verses, that the third, if the husband exercises this divorce option for the third time, then the Quran has laid out a procedure which has to be followed if the two have to marry again. But these three divorces, as you can see, are the ones which are mentioned such that in the first two cases, or the first two opportunities that arise, a husband can take back his wife within the iddat period. But if this opportunity or this situation arises a third time in his life, then if he exercises the option of divorce, then a different procedure will be laid down, and that is then suggested in the next verses. But I'm going to stop here and leave the rest of the discussion for our next session, because this is another very important area which will cover the ignominious issue of halala and some of the other things related to it, which relate to the third divorce. And then inshallah we'll see how it has been grossly misunderstood, and what the Quran has said is absolutely different from what generally people have understood. So just to summarize what we have started today, that the procedure of divorce which has been laid down in the Quran primarily is broadly laid down in Surah Talaq, and then of course verses in Surah Baqarah. They provide certain details, but the important thing is that the first important statute of divorce is that before even entering into this whole issue, this scenario, arbitration is something that has to be adopted. And the more it has been stressed, the more we flout this in our general social dealings. Seldom do we find this arbitration taking place between the husbands, from the husband's side and from the wife's side. So the Quran has stressed that before the husband even thinks of divorcing his wife, this arbitration must take place. And only when this arbitration fails should now the husband think of divorcing his wife. And the way to divorce his wife is that in a cool and a calculated way, in a calm way, he should pronounce just one divorce sentence and then not in any way turn out his wife from his house. The two must live together. This is like a probation period, and the reason to observe this iddat period is that the wife should not be pregnant. In case of pregnancy, if it is a certain, because of course we know that in the times of the Prophet there was no means to a certain pregnancy, unless of course these menstrual cycles would be availed. So the Quran says that the iddat period is 3 menstrual cycles. Now once these 3 menstrual cycles pass, clearly now we would know that the wife is not pregnant, and so therefore it is fine. But if this pregnancy is the case, then of course these cycles would be, we would be able to determine if this pregnancy is there. So, but in nonetheless, if it is certain that there is no pregnancy, then there is no iddat period to be observed, because we also know that as soon as the lady delivers the child, the iddat period expires. So both these things tell us, one, if the fact that there is no iddat period if the two have not come into conjugal contact, which is mentioned elsewhere in Surah Ahzab, and the second place here in which it is said that as soon as the lady or the wife delivers the child, her iddat will expire. This tells us that basically iddat is observed, or this waiting period is observed to determine whether the wife is pregnant or not. And an additional benefit of this is that if they are living in the same house in that iddat period, then as the Quran has said, لَعَلَّ اللَّهَ يُحْدِثُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ أَمْرًا, it may well be that the Almighty creates circumstances in which the two can reconcile. However, if in these 3 menstrual cycles or this waiting period, as it approaches its end, if the husband is going to take back his wife, of course he has this right, or if he intends to permanently separate, then also he has this right, but 2 witnesses must be present who can testify to this parting of ways. And once this parting of ways is done, then the Quran has said that you must not take back any gifts that have been given to the wife, unless of course we have just studied these 2 exceptions. And more than that, the Quran has exhorted husbands that at a time of parting of ways, according to your own financial means, you should give even more to your wives, let alone taking back gifts from them. So this is how the Quran has reversed the trend which is found in many societies. So inshallah we'll take up the remaining portion of the divorce laws in our remaining sessions. So if you have any questions regarding what we have covered until now, please raise them now.
So in US, a woman can file for a divorce. It doesn't have to be a woman asking permission from her husband to divorce her. And also we see men abuse sort of this permission to get divorced, especially if they're abusive of their wives, they don't permit them to get divorced. So what do women do in those cases? And particularly for women living in the Western society where they have this right to ask for divorce, do they still need to follow the Sharia?
So as I said, the initiation of divorce according to the Sharia should be from the husband. But if the husband is resisting or he is not complying with the wife's request, then of course the court can be involved, because this is one area in which the Quran is silent. but using ijtihad and common sense and practice, we can see that because of the fact that the wife has an equal right for separation, so she will ask this divorce from the husband, and if he is not willing, or he's not convinced, or he's even going as far as harassing her, then after a certain amount of time, the court can annul the marriage, or the court can call the husband and ask him to divorce his wife, because now there's no reasonable argument or proof or reason left for him not to divorce her. Of course, this is what the wife has the right to. So because of the fact that she cannot divorce herself, so she'll always request the husband, and her husband has to comply. He can be given some time in which he can come and ask the wife, or maybe try to have a reconciliation. But if that doesn't take place, then he is bound to follow the procedure. So this is the part as far as the Sharia is concerned. Now coming to the US law, in which a lady can file divorce. So obviously when she is filing for divorce, if she keeps in mind the fact that this initiation is something that that should come from the husband, that this is something I believe can be incorporated in the law. If you talk to your attorney, that she's asking for divorce, and she would like the husband to have that divorce given to her. But if the husband refuses, then she can approach the court and ask for an annulment of marriage. So I do believe that the Sharia can still be followed in the case of the US laws, because if both know that the Sharia requires the husband to initiate the procedure, so all that she needs to tell the husband is to initiate the divorce procedure.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Sir, in the subheading of before divorce, Ghamidi
Mhm.
Saab mentions appointing two arbitrators. In the Pakistani law, we have that after the divorce is pronounced and notice is given to the Union Council, the Union Council will appoint two arbitrators, ask the wife and the husband to nominate one each, and then
Mhm.
come and try and reconciliation. Would
Mhm.
that be in conformity with what the Quran is saying, or it has to be before the divorce is pronounced? Because human nature is such that when a person is in a rage, or in circumstances where he does not
Mhm.
wish to appoint two arbitrators before divorcing, he just divorces. Then would that divorce be illegal?
Well, you see, the procedure that has been laid down in the Quran is that, they must involve these arbitrators. And precisely for this reason, the Quran wants divorce to take place in a manner that both are in their senses, they are not in a state of rage or fury, and it's a calm and calculated procedure. And of course, because of this, the law, you can adjudicate this law in your own country. This is a thing that you can do, that no divorce will be entertained unless this arbitration has already gone through. But the current law, as you have said, takes into account this arbitration after this divorce sentence is pronounced. This to me is not in consonance with what the Quran says. The Quran clearly says, the words are وَإِن خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَابْعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِّنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا. So it clearly says that even before this divorce is going to take place, you fear that this is going to take place. You have this inkling that matters are now getting out of hand. So the stress of the Quran is that this is a pre-divorce scenario. It should not be a post-divorce scenario, which also gives us this beautiful advice that they must not take place. Then this whole procedure must not take place in an uncalculated way, in a in a fit of fury or rage. And we will come to that later on in our sessions, in which divorces which are pronounced in rage, they are not even held valid by the Quran and by Islamic law, because in that case you are just doing something out of your intention, and after 10 minutes or 15 minutes you'll realize that you have done something. It's like abusing someone and then realizing, of course, that you did the wrong thing. And as in the case is the case here, that when you divorce someone in a rage or a fit of rage or a fit of fury, you as soon as that fury is over, you just realize what you have done. So the Quran says that the intention of the couple, of the husband, must be found out, and this is borne out by the prophets in certain procedural cases, as we'll study later on. But I was just going into more details to explain the fact that arbitration is something that must be done before divorce is initiated. And once that is completed, should the Union Council or whatever the procedure that has been adopted should then commence.
But sir, the divorce gets finalized only after 90 days of the pronouncement or the receipt of divorce by the Union Council. So, in fact, the divorce has not actually taken place.
But what has happened is that the iddat period has begun. You see, that should not be begin.
Sir, the iddat period here in Pakistan, the law is framed in such a way that the iddat period begins almost immediately. So, when these two
So,
arbitrators are appointed by the Union Council, the divorce has in fact not taken place according to the Pakistani law here.
but the iddat has commenced.
The iddat has commenced.
So you see, this is a contradiction. This should not be the case. You see, once arbitration has finished, only then iddat should commence.
Right, sir. Right, sir. And one small point, sir. You said that divorce is a part of all Sharias. As far as I believe, the Catholics, there is no institution of divorce. It's to have and to hold until death do us apart.
So you see, that is not because they didn't have a Sharia. That is more because Saint Paul revoked the Sharia or the Mosaic Sharia. So we have the whole procedure laid out in Deuteronomy, in the Old Testament. So the Catholics or the Protestants, the way they follow Christianity today, is that they don't have any divorce laws because Saint Paul revoked those laws which were found in the Old Testament. It's not that they don't have those laws; it's that they have relieved themselves from not only these divorce laws but all facets of the Sharia.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम थैंक यू मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि लाइक मैं कुरान का रेफरेंस तो नहीं कोट करना चाहूंगी बिकॉज आई डोंट हैव इन डेप्थ नॉलेज ऑफ कुरान बट हमारे जो उल्मा है वो जब भी बात करते हैं अडल्ट्री पे तो वो औरत की सजा तो स्टेप बाय स्टेप बताते हैं जब वो शादीशुदा हो और वो अडल्ट्री में इन्वॉल्व होती है बट दे डोंट टॉक अबाउट मैन आदमी का सिंपली आप डिवोर्स ले सकते हैं व्हाई इज इट सो बिकॉज हमसे नॉन मुस्लिम लोग जो हैं वो सवाल करते हैं like they feel it like a discrimination even scholars
I
don't
mean,
talk
you
about
see,
it
this is something which is, I mean, both have equal grounds in the case of the husband and the wife. The reason that the adultery aspect is discussed here is not because adultery is not a ground. It's only because in this situation, a husband can take back certain gifts that he has given her. So it's not in relation to the to adultery itself. I mean, if adultery has been committed, it is an equal ground for both to get divorce or to take divorce. So that is a separate thing. The reason that it figures here is not because of those reasons, but because the Quran has asked a husband not to take back any gift if the wife is guilty of adultery. I mean, if in normal circumstances. But if she is guilty of adultery, then she can get, then the husband can take back the gifts. So the adultery portion is, I mean, is discussed only on the issue or because of the issue that whether you can take back gifts or not. So in normal circumstances, gifts given to the wife can never be taken back. But if she is guilty of adultery, then yes, at the time of divorce, he has the right to take them back. That is why adultery is discussed here. Other than that, grounds for divorce, whether it's the husband who has committed adultery or the wife, I mean, both can invoke both these grounds independently for their own selves. So there is no discrimination in this regard.
okay thank you
Thank you. Asif Ali, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. My
Welcome.
question is related to the US laws because when we are living over here, I mean, the divorce is like quite in a different manner. I mean, wife can file a divorce or the husband can file a divorce and there will be an amicable and settlement and so on and so many procedures set out. So if a Muslim has to follow that Surah Al-Talaq or the Surah Al-Baqarah process, so what type of, I mean, how we can comply with the Sharia, keeping in view that we are living in US law? If you file anything, then you have to follow the US law.
I just answered this question, right? I think if the husband and wife both are entrusted in following the Quran, it's absolutely very easy to follow the US law and at the same time follow the Sharia. All that a wife will do in that regard is that she would ask the husband that she's not going to file divorce because this is something which is against the Sharia. She will ask him to give divorce to her, and he should initiate the procedure. And it's as simple as that. I mean, it's not the law that is in any way hindering us. It is our own, procedure or our own understanding that might be different. Otherwise, what has happened in the US law is that if the wife wants to file divorce, she can. But in the case of the Sharia, all that the wife needs to do is that she will ask the husband that, well, if you should divorce me because I don't want to live with you. And in normal circumstances, after reconciliation efforts have failed, of course, the husband is expected to give that divorce. But if he desists or if he does not live up to his commitment, then the wife can, of course, file for divorce. This would be what we call as khula, which would actually mean that in spite of asking her husband to give her divorce, he did not comply to her, and now she has no option but to seek that divorce herself.
But the later procedures I'm talking as well, because let's say the split of the property, the split
Again,
of the spousal.
I mean, this is again something that can be adjusted if you would like to follow what Islam says, in which there is no split of property 50-50% as the US laws say. You can easily gift it back, or there are procedures laid out in which you can go to your solicitor or attorney and write down this, that, well, I'm not going to demand in 50%. There's a case of no demand from me. So you see, it's not something of an obligation that has to be followed. US laws can be easily adapted to our Islamic understanding. What they do is that they make it an obligation for those who would like to follow them. Otherwise, if you'd like to readjust, it's a simple matter of consigning your own personal understanding to the attorney and telling him that I am not, for example, in the case of the wife, that she's not going to take the 50% because this is not stipulated by the Sharia. But if she insists, I mean, what can we do? That would only mean that she is insisting on something which is not in the Sharia, and in that case, I mean, the Sharia can play no role. It can only play a role when when both spouses want the Sharia to play a role. So I think I've studied those laws, and I can tell you that if the husband and wife, they would like to get separated in the legal way, in the Islamic way, there is no hindrance in US laws. This hindrance only comes when one of the spouses backs out, or he or she would like to insist to follow the US law. I mean, in the way it has laid out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Nashad Shafkat, please go ahead.
Yes, another question is with regard to the returning of gifts. Two exceptions where the husband will not demand return of gifts. If the wife is guilty of lewdness, or as we call it otherwise, adultery.
It's the reverse. He can demand the return.
He can, right. So would that being guilty of lewdness or adultery be according to the principles of proving adultery or proven adultery, according to what the Quran has said?
I mean,
or
it cannot be just a. It cannot be just a blame. It cannot be just a allegation of adultery. It has to be proven.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you very much.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
डॉक्टर साहब, अगर दो तलाक के बाद अगर इद्दत के दौरान रुजू नहीं किया जाता, इद्दत गुजरने के बाद रुजू किया जाता है, तो वो उसमें रुजू हो सकता है, या एक में रुजू किया और दूसरे में, एक में इद्दत के दौरान रुजू किया और दूसरे में इद्दत गुजर गई, तो वो किस तरह होगा, वो क्या होगा?
So they'll get married again in that case. The nikah has to be redone in that case. So you see, what has happened is that in the first instance, the husband took back his wife within the iddat period. So he exhausted one chance. Now he has exercised this right of divorce a second time in his life. But this time he did not take back his wife, and the iddat period passed, and now they are free individuals. So if they have to come together again, all that they need to do is have that nikah done again.
लेकिन ऐसा हमारे यहाँ तो ये नौबत ही नहीं आती ना कि वो एक के बाद जो है वो मतलब सेपरेट हो जाए और फिर निकाह की नौबत आए। वो तो हमारे यहाँ तो फिर तीन ही
That is because of that misunderstanding of the law of divorce. I mean, when people don't follow the correct procedure, that's another issue. Otherwise, what you've asked is if that is followed in letter and spirit. This is always something that can be done. So, I mean, if the iddat period expires, the two are free. So they can marry someone else or they can marry each other again. But this can only be done twice. I mean, if that is done a third time, then of course the Quran has laid out a different procedure.
और खुला के मामले में भी ये समझा जाता है कि पूरा मेहर और सब कुछ जो कुछ भी जायदाद या मेहर भी
Right.
और गिफ्ट्स भी सब कुछ वापस होंगे तो खुला होगा।
This
और
is this
मर्द
is
जो है वो इसलिए नहीं तलाक दे रहे होते कि हमें क्योंकि ये सारी चीजें देनी पड़ेंगी,
right.
मेहर भी देना पड़ेगा क्योंकि मेहर को भी खास कर लिया है तलाक से कि मेहर भी देना
So
पड़ेगा और सारी चीजें देनी पड़ेगी, तो लिहाजा वो तलाक नहीं देते और वो खुला लेती हैं तो वो सब कुछ देती हैं।
absolutely right. So this is a very unfortunate scenario that often results in the subcontinent. In the first place, husbands, they have not even given the meher or the dower at the time of nikah. It's mostly deferred. And because of the fact that they think that this dower can also be taken back, so when the khula is filed or the divorce is filed from the wife, then this is why, I mean, they desist. That in such cases they think that they are not liable to pay that dower back or that amount back, and this is a very unfortunate scenario. Otherwise, as we have clearly said, that once these gifts have been given, they just cannot be taken back in any case. As far as the dower is concerned, that is out of question. That belongs to the wife the day it has been committed. Whether you give it later on or whether you give it on the day of wedding, it belongs to the wife. That is out of question that you even have it returned. The question of return has only arisen in the case of gifts which are over and above the dower amount. So the dower is not even in consideration. What is in consideration are the gifts which are given or the property that is gifted by the husband to the wife.
और एक और चीज नहीं समझ आई, मुझे वो पता नहीं वो आज डिस्कस हुई है कि नहीं, वो वाली बात के जो एक तो बेवा है जो वो उनको 1 साल तक घर से ना निकाला जाए, और कुछ मुझे लगता है कि उसमें तलाक याफ्ता की भी बात है कि उनको भी खर्चा दिया जाए 1 साल का, कुछ इस तरह का है शायद सूरह बकरा में, अगर मुझे
So we have discussed one part of that if you are divorcing someone, then you must give her some amount of provisions. وَلِلْ مَطَلَّقَاتُ مَتَاعٌ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. That's the verse that we have discussed. However, for widows, 1 year of maintenance has been prescribed by the Quran, and we're going to discuss that in a later session. So this is a will that every husband has to write, that in case of his death, when his wife becomes a widow, then for 1 year she cannot be turned out of the husband's house, and for 1 year she must be provided from the maintenance for the same amount of maintenance that she was given when the husband was alive. So for 1 year she will given nafaqah and sukna, which means maintenance and residence. So that is something which we will discuss later on, but that relates to widows. We are discussing divorced ladies at the moment.
बहुत शुक्रिया।
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. That was it for all the questions today.